The ultimatum. The morning started like any other on Arcturus Prime. Governor Elena Vasquez stood at the observation deck of the Central Administration Tower, watching the mining crews prepare for their shift. The colony had been established only 8 years ago, but it had already become one of the most productive settlements in human space. 15,000 people called this place home. They had built schools, hospitals, and parks. Children played in the streets. Families gathered for meals. It was a peaceful place, far from the politics and conflicts of the inner systems. Elena sipped her coffee and smiled at the sight of the morning convoy heading toward the mineral fields. The convoy consisted of 12 heavy haulers and their escort vehicles. They moved in a steady line across the red soil, leaving trails of dust behind them. She thought about how much the colony had grown since those early days when they had lived in prefabricated shelters and eaten recycled food. Now they had fresh vegetables from the hydroponics farms and real houses with real windows. Life was good here. The alarm changed everything. It started as a low pulse that made the coffee in her cup ripple. Then it grew louder, becoming a wailing siren that echoed through every street and building in the colony. Elena dropped her cup and ran to the command center. Her deputy, James Porter, was already there, his face pale as he stared at the main screen. "Governor, you need to see this," he said. The screen showed the space above their world. Hanging in orbit like dark clouds before a storm were ships. Not human ships. These vessels were massive and angular, covered in black armor that seemed to absorb light. There were hundreds of them, arranged in a perfect formation that surrounded the entire planet. Elena felt her heart stop. She had seen ships like these before, in intelligence briefings and historical records. They belonged to the Krillian Empire, a civilization that had conquered 43 worlds in the past 2 centuries. "How long have they been there?" Elena asked. James checked his console. "They appeared 17 minutes ago. They must have been using some kind of cloaking technology. We never detected their approach." Elena stared at the screen. The Krillians were known throughout the galaxy as methodical conquerors. They surrounded worlds and gave long ultimatums. They enjoyed watching their victims squirm and beg. They had never lost a war because they only attacked species they knew they could defeat. And now they were here, above her peaceful colony, above 15,000 human civilians who had done nothing to deserve this. The main screen flickered and a new image appeared. It was the face of a Krillian warrior. His skin was covered in grey scales that formed natural armor plates. His eyes were yellow with vertical pupils like a predator. For breathing, slits on his neck opened and closed with each breath. He wore a uniform covered in medals and symbols of rank. This was Warlord Zekthar, Supreme Commander of the Krillian 7th Conquest Fleet. "Humans of Arcturus Prime," he said in a voice that had been translated by alien computers into human language. His tone was calm and almost polite, which made his words even more disturbing. "You have been selected for incorporation into the Krillian Empire. This is a great honor. Many species have joined us over the centuries and found purpose in service to a greater civilization. We are not unreasonable beings. We understand that change can be difficult. Therefore, we offer you 45 standard days to make your decision." He paused and his thin lips pulled back to reveal rows of sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "During these 45 days, you will do the following. First, you will surrender all military assets including weapons, vehicles, and defensive systems. Second, you will provide a complete census of your population including skills and genetic profiles. Third, you will prepare your people for relocation to designated labor facilities throughout our empire. Those who possess useful skills will be treated well. Those who resist will be eliminated along with their families. This is not a negotiation. This is reality. You have 45 days to accept it." The transmission ended. The command center was silent. Elena looked at the faces of her staff. Some of them were crying. Others looked angry. A few just seemed numb with shock. James spoke first. "Governor, what do we do?" Elena straightened her shoulders. Send a priority transmission to Earth. Include the full recording and all sensor data on their fleet. Tell them we need help immediately. The message was sent within minutes. It traveled through a network of relay stations that connected human colonies across known space. The transmission moved at speeds faster than light, compressing vast distances into manageable time. It reached Earth in 6 hours. On Earth, the Emergency Defense Council gathered in the war room beneath the Planetary Defense Headquarters. The room was large and circular with a holographic display in the center that could show real-time data from anywhere in human space. Around the display sat the leaders who made decisions about humanity's survival. There was Defense Minister Richard Ashford, a man in his 60s with white hair and steady hands. There was Admiral James Kutcher, head of the Navy, a woman who had spent 40 years commanding ships in deep space. There were representatives from intelligence agencies, scientific divisions, and diplomatic corps. And there was Fleet Commander Sarah Chen. Sarah was 42 years old with black hair pulled back in a tight bun and dark eyes that missed nothing. She had joined the military at 18 and had risen through the ranks by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone around her. She had fought pirates in the outer systems and defended convoys from raiders. She had commanded a destroyer during the brief war with the Talon Syndicate and had earned a reputation for brutal efficiency. When the transmission from Arcturus Prime began playing on the holographic display, Sarah watched it 3 times without showing any emotion. "They want 45 days, said Minister Ashford. "That gives us time to assemble a diplomatic team. Perhaps we can negotiate a settlement that saves lives." Sarah looked at him like he had suggested surrendering immediately. "Negotiate," she repeated. "They just told our people they will be slaves. What exactly do you want to negotiate?" Minister Ashford shifted in his seat. "Commander Chen, the Krillians have never been defeated in open warfare. They have conquered species far more advanced than us. If we attack them directly, we might lose everything." Sarah stood up and walked to the holographic display. She manipulated the controls until the image showed the Krillian fleet in orbit above Arcturus Prime. "And if we negotiate, what happens then?" "We send diplomats. We talk for weeks. We offer compromises. And while we are talking, they are fortifying their position. They are scanning our defenses. They are preparing for the inevitable moment when we realize they never intended to negotiate in good faith." She turned to face the council. "I have read the historical files. 43 species have surrendered to the Krillians over the past 200 years. Every single one of those species eventually tried to rebel. Every single one was exterminated down to the last child." The room went quiet. Admiral Kutcher spoke from her seat. "What do you recommend, Commander?" Sarah looked at her with steady eyes. "Protocol Omega. Immediate military response with maximum force. No warning. No negotiation. We hit them hard enough that they never consider threatening human space again." Protocol Omega had been created 50 years ago after a tragedy that still haunted humanity. A species called the Vex Collective had threatened human colonies with invasion. Earth had tried diplomacy. For 14 months, human representatives had talked and negotiated and offered compromises. During those 14 months, the Vex had secretly raided outer settlements and taken 60,000 humans as slaves. None of them were ever recovered. When humanity finally responded with military force, they had been so furious that they had hunted the Vex across 3 star systems and destroyed them completely. Not a single Vex survived. After that day, humanity made a promise to itself. Never again would they let an enemy hide behind false negotiations while innocent people suffered. Any species that threatened human civilians would face immediate and overwhelming force. The goal was not to win battles. The goal was to end threats permanently. Minister Ashford looked uncomfortable. Protocol Omega is extreme. It was designed for existential threats. "This is an existential threat," Sarah said. "They have surrounded a human colony with a war fleet. They have threatened to enslave our people. If we show weakness now, every aggressive species in the galaxy will see us as easy prey. We need to send a message that is so clear and so terrible that no one ever mistakes our restraint for weakness again. The vote took 90 minutes. There were arguments and debates. Some council members worried about the moral implications. Others worried about starting a war with the Krillian Empire. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Defense Minister Ashford turned to Sarah. "You have your orders, Commander Chen. Take the 7th Fleet to Arcturus Prime. Eliminate the Krillian presence. Leave no survivors." Sarah nodded once and left the war room. She walked through corridors filled with soldiers and staff members who stopped and saluted as she passed. She took a transport to the orbital station where her flagship waited. The ship was called Vindication, and it was one of the most powerful vessels humanity had ever built. Captain Marcus Reed met her at the airlock. Marcus was 38 years old with brown hair starting to grey at the temples and a scar across his left cheek from a boarding action 5 years ago. He had served with Sarah for a decade and knew her well enough to read her expression. "Commander on deck," he announced. The bridge crew stood at attention. "Status report," Sarah said. Marcus gestured to the tactical display. 47 ships ready for immediate departure. Full weapons load. All crews at battle readiness. Estimated travel time to Arcturus Prime is 9 hours at maximum speed. Sarah sat in the command chair and looked at her officers. They were young and old, men and women from every corner of human space. They wore grey uniforms with the insignia of the United Earth Defense Force. They had trained their entire lives for moments like this. "You have all seen the transmission from Arcturus Prime," Sarah said. "The Krillians have surrounded our people and threatened them with slavery. They expect us to spend the next 45 days begging for mercy while they enjoy our fear. They are going to be very disappointed." She touched the controls on her chair. "Set course for Arcturus Prime. Maximum speed. All ships are to maintain combat readiness and radio silence. We will arrive unannounced." "Sir," said Lieutenant Eva Torres from the communication station. "At maximum speed, we will arrive 44 days and 15 hours ahead of their deadline." "Good," Sarah replied. "That should give them just enough time to wonder why we are not talking." The 7th Fleet moved away from Earth orbit. One by one, the 47 ships activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished into the darkness between stars. They carried no diplomats, no negotiators, and no white flags. They carried only weapons and the will to use them without hesitation or mercy. In orbit above Arcturus Prime, Warlord Zekthar settled into his command chamber and prepared to wait. His species had perfected the art of psychological warfare over centuries. 45 days was the perfect amount of time. It was long enough for the humans to feel hopeless but short enough that they would not have time to mount a serious defense. During those 45 days, he would broadcast messages reminding them of their situation. He would show them images of other conquered species serving the Empire. He would break their spirit before he broke their bodies. Zekthar had conquered 19 worlds in his 300 years of life. He had seen every possible response from defeated species. Some fought briefly before surrendering. Some tried to negotiate for better terms. Some simply gave up immediately. But they all surrendered eventually. Everyone always surrendered. He had no reason to think humans would be different. He had studied their history and found them to be emotional and irrational creatures who formed strong attachments to their offspring. They would sacrifice anything to protect their children. This made them easy to control. He looked at the planet below through the viewport of his flagship. It was a small world with 1 moon and 3 continents. The human settlement was concentrated in one region near the equator. 15,000 lives hung in the balance, waiting for their leaders to make the obvious choice. Zekthar felt no guilt about what he was doing. This was simply the natural order of the universe. Strong species conquered weak species. It had always been this way. It would always be this way. What he did not know was that the humans were already coming. What he did not know was that they had no intention of negotiating. What he did not know was that in less than 10 hours, his entire fleet would be burning wreckage and he would be dead. The humans were coming, and they had nothing to say. The extermination. Warlord Zekthar was reviewing tactical reports when the alarm began screaming through his flagship. The sound was piercing and urgent, designed to alert the crew to immediate danger. He had heard this alarm only twice in his 300 years of military service. Both times had been during training exercises. Never in actual combat. No species had ever been foolish enough to attack a Krillian Conquest fleet directly. "Report," he commanded, rising from his meditation platform. His second-in-command, Sub-Warlord Thexis, was already at the sensor station, his scales rippling with confusion. "Warlord, we are detecting multiple faster-than-light signatures. They are appearing at the edge of the system." Zekthar moved to the command center of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance. On the main tactical display, he could see his fleet of 317 ships arranged in perfect siege formation around the human colony. And now, at the system's edge, new contacts were appearing. "How many vessels?" Zekthar asked. Thexis checked the readings again. 47 ships, Warlord. They match human military signatures. 47 ships. Zekthar felt a moment of confusion. The humans had responded, but they had sent less than a sixth of his force. Perhaps this was a token resistance, a symbolic gesture before the inevitable surrender negotiations. And they arrived in how much time? 9 hours and 12 minutes since our ultimatum, Warlord. Zekthar's breathing slits flared. 9 hours. The humans had crossed light years of space in the time it took most species to schedule their first diplomatic meeting. This was unexpected. Most species spent weeks organizing diplomatic missions before responding to an ultimatum. The humans had mobilized a fleet in hours. "Open a communication channel," Zekthar ordered. "I will speak with their commander. Make it clear that we are willing to accept their surrender with minimal penalties if they respond promptly." The communication officer worked at his console for several moments. "Warlord, the channel is open." The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of a human warship. Zekthar found himself looking at a human female sitting in a command chair. She had dark hair pulled back severely and eyes that showed no emotion. Her uniform was grey with simple insignia. She looked directly at Zekthar without any visible fear or uncertainty. This was Fleet Commander Sarah Chen, though Zekthar did not know her name or her reputation. "Human Commander," Zekthar began in his most diplomatic tone. "You have arrived sooner than expected. This shows wisdom. I am Warlord Zekthar of the Krillian 7th Conquest Fleet. I am authorized to negotiate terms for your surrender. If you order your vessels to power down their weapons immediately, I can offer favorable conditions for your people. Perhaps we can arrange for some of your colony to remain autonomous under Krillian supervision." The human said nothing. She simply stared at him with those dark, empty eyes. Zekthar waited. In his experience, this was the moment when conquered species began to bargain. They offered resources, technology, or tribute. They promised loyalty and service. They begged for their children. He had heard every possible plea during his long career. The human just sat there in silence. "I am offering you a chance to save lives," Zekthar continued. "Surely you understand that resistance is futile. You have 47 ships. I have 317. Your fleet cannot possibly defeat mine. Accept my generous terms while they are still available." The human finally spoke. Her voice was flat and cold, without any hint of emotion. "You threatened human civilians. There will be no negotiation." The channel closed. Zekthar stood in stunned silence. His officers looked at each other uncertainly. No species had ever refused to negotiate. Even species that ultimately chose to fight would spend time talking first, trying to find a peaceful solution. The humans had crossed light years just to tell him they would not talk. "Warlord," said Thexis, "the human fleet is moving into attack formation." "Attack formation," Zekthar repeated. They have 47 ships against our 317. This must be some kind of tactical display meant to improve their negotiating position. They will attack briefly, suffer losses, and then request terms. Prepare the fleet for defensive action. Use minimum necessary force. We want prisoners for interrogation. On the bridge of the Vindication, Fleet Commander Sarah Chen watched the Krillian fleet on her tactical display. The enemy ships were large and heavily armed, but they were also slow and poorly positioned. They were arranged for siege warfare, not ship-to-ship combat. They had surrounded the planet in a way that looked impressive but left them vulnerable to concentrated attack. They had forgotten how to fight because they had spent centuries bullying weaker species into surrender. Lieutenant Torres, Sarah said, status of electronic warfare package. Torres checked her console. Ready, Commander. On your command. Chief Engineer William Cross, weapon status. All 47 ships report full combat readiness. Targeting solutions locked. We have identified their flagship and priority targets. Sarah nodded. The Krillians thought this would be a negotiation. They were wrong. Launch electronic warfare package, Sarah ordered. All frequencies. Maximum power. The Vindication and its companion ships released a coordinated burst of electromagnetic energy. It was not a weapon that caused physical damage. Instead, it targeted communication systems, sensor networks, and coordination protocols. The pulse was specifically designed to exploit vulnerabilities in Krillian technology that human intelligence had discovered years ago. In 3 seconds, the Krillian fleet went blind and deaf. On the Eternal Dominance, every screen went dark. Every communication channel filled with static. Warlord Zekthar shouted orders, but no ship beyond his own bridge could hear him. What is happening? Zekthar demanded. Report immediately. We have lost all contact with the fleet, Warlord, said Thexis. Communication systems are down. Sensors are malfunctioning. That is impossible. Our systems are heavily shielded against electronic warfare. The humans have found a way through our defenses, Warlord. This level of technological sophistication suggests they have been studying our fleet architecture for years. Zekthar felt something he had not felt in decades. It was the cold touch of fear. The humans had not arrived unprepared. They had arrived with specific weapons designed to counter Krillian advantages. This was not a desperate gesture. This was a calculated attack. Outside in the darkness of space, the human fleet began its work. The ships spread out in a pattern that maximized their firing solutions while minimizing their exposure to counterattack. Each vessel was connected to the others through a quantum communication network that could not be jammed. When one ship identified a weak point in an enemy vessel, every other ship knew about it instantly. They shared targeting data, ammunition counts, and tactical assessments in real time. The Krillians had numbers. The humans had coordination and technology and cold determination. All ships, weapons free, Captain Marcus Reed announced to the fleet. Target priority Alpha. Focus fire on capital ships. The human fleet opened fire as one. 47 ships launched missiles, particle beams, and kinetic projectiles in a synchronized wave of destruction. They did not spread their fire across the enemy fleet. Instead, they concentrated on specific targets, overwhelming shields and armor with focused attacks. The first Krillian ship to die was a heavy cruiser on the outer edge of their formation. It took 7 simultaneous hits from different human vessels. Its shields collapsed under the assault and then its armor disintegrated. The ship broke apart in a flash of light that lit up the darkness. Zekthar watched through the viewport as his fleet began to die. He could see explosions blooming in the distance, each one representing hundreds of his soldiers. He tried to send orders, but his communications were still blocked. He tried to coordinate a counterattack, but his captains could not hear him. The humans were systematically destroying his fleet one ship at a time, working from the outside in. Warlord, said Thexis, his voice shaking. We must retreat. The humans are not fighting like any species we have encountered. They are not trying to win a battle. They are trying to exterminate us. Zekthar finally understood. The humans had not come to negotiate or to prove their strength. They had come to kill every Krillian in this system. He looked at the human vessels on his limited sensors. They moved with terrible precision, like predators that had cornered wounded prey. There was no anger in their movements, no hesitation. They were simply doing a job. Broadcast on all emergency frequencies, Zekthar ordered. All ships retreat immediately. Scatter and flee to designated rally points. But the humans had planned for this too. As soon as the Krillian ships began to scatter, human vessels moved to block the escape routes. They had positioned themselves perfectly to turn retreat into a slaughter. The battle was being watched by others. Far from the combat zone, a small observation ship from the Galactic Confederation floated in silent witness. The Confederation was a loose alliance of civilized species who shared information and maintained diplomatic relations. They sent observers to major conflicts throughout known space, recording events for their vast archives. Ambassador Vorlax of the Sethari species sat in his observation chair and watched the battle unfold on multiple screens. He had witnessed 31 wars in his 200 years as a Confederation diplomat. He had never seen anything like this. "Are you recording everything?" Vorlax asked his assistant. "Yes, Ambassador. The feed is being broadcast to all Confederation members in real time. Over 600 species are watching this battle." Vorlax nodded slowly. 600 species were learning something important about humans today. The Sethari had first made contact with humanity 70 years ago. Humans had seemed unremarkable at the time. They were not the strongest or fastest or most intelligent species. They did not have natural weapons or psychic abilities. They were soft creatures who needed technology to survive in space. But there had always been something disturbing about them, something in their eyes that made Vorlax uncomfortable. Now, watching the Krillian fleet burn, Vorlax finally understood what that something was. Humans were not driven by honor or tradition or spiritual beliefs. They were driven by cold pragmatism and an absolute refusal to accept threats to their people. They did not fight wars to prove their strength. They fought wars to eliminate threats permanently. On the bridge of the Vindication, Sarah Chen moved through the battle with calm efficiency. Her fleet had destroyed 142 enemy ships in the first 20 minutes. They had not lost a single vessel. The Krillians were scattered and confused, their communication still blocked by human electronic warfare. "Commander," said Captain Reed, "the flagship is attempting to rally surviving ships. They are forming a defensive cluster around the Eternal Dominance." Sarah studied the tactical display. The Krillians were trying to protect their command ship. It was a natural response, but it was also a fatal mistake. By grouping together, they made themselves easier targets. All ships, new targeting priority. Focus fire on the defensive cluster. Start with the outer ring and work inward. I want that flagship destroyed last. Let them watch their fleet die. "Sir," said Lieutenant Torres. "We are receiving multiple transmissions from the Krillian flagship. They are requesting to surrender." The bridge went quiet. Every officer turned to look at Sarah, waiting for her response. Sarah thought about the 15,000 civilians on Arcturus Prime who would have been slaves. She thought about the 60,000 humans taken by the Vex 50 years ago, never to be seen again. She thought about the 43 species the Krillians had conquered, 12 of whom had been exterminated after showing mercy. "Do not respond," Sarah said. "Continue the attack." "But Commander," Torres began. "Lieutenant," Sarah interrupted. Her voice was not angry, just firm. "Do not respond. That is an order." Torres hesitated for only a moment. Then she nodded and turned back to her console. The battle continued with mechanical precision. The human fleet tore through the Krillian defensive cluster like a blade through paper. Ships exploded one after another, their debris spreading across the orbital space. On the Eternal Dominance, Warlord Zekthar experienced true despair for the first time. His surrender requests were being ignored. The humans were still attacking, still destroying his ships systematically. They showed no emotion, no hesitation, no mercy. "Commander," said Thexis quietly, "I have accessed our historical archives. 50 years ago, a species called the Vex Collective threatened human colonies. The humans attempted diplomatic solutions." "What happened?" Zekthar asked, though he already feared the answer. "During the negotiations, the Vex took 60,000 humans as slaves. When the humans discovered this, they hunted the Vex across multiple systems and destroyed them completely. Not a single Vex survived." Zekthar felt his breathing slits close in terror. "They committed genocide." "Yes, warlord. And after that, they created something called Protocol Omega. Any species that threatens human civilians is to be destroyed immediately. No negotiation. No warning. No survivors." Zekthar understood his fatal mistake. He had threatened the wrong species. He had expected humans to behave like other conquered races, begging for survival. Instead, he had activated a doctrine designed to ensure no enemy ever threatened humanity twice. "We need to escape," Zekthar said desperately. "Find any gap in their formation. We must warn the Krillian Empire about what these creatures truly are." "Commander, there are no gaps. The humans have surrounded us completely. They planned this from the beginning." Outside the viewport, another wave of missiles approached. Zekthar watched them come with the certainty of death. His fleet of 317 ships now numbered less than 30. The human fleet still had all 47 vessels intact. In the observation ship, Ambassador Vorlax watched the end of the battle. The Krillian flagship was the last to die. It took concentrated fire from multiple human ships, its shields flaring and collapsing under the relentless assault. When it finally exploded, the flash was bright enough to light up the entire orbital space. "Ambassador," said his assistant, "I am receiving communications from Confederation members. They are asking if this is truly happening." "Tell them it is real," Vorlax said quietly. "Tell them to remember this day. Tell them that humans are not like other species. When they fight, they do not fight for honor or territory or resources. They fight to end threats forever." He paused and added, "Tell them to never, ever threaten a human colony." The battle lasted 37 minutes from first shot to final kill. When it ended, 317 Krillian ships had been reduced to scattered debris. 47 human ships remained operational. Not one human vessel had been destroyed. The message was clear and it spread across the galaxy at the speed of light through Confederation communication networks. Humanity had shown the universe its true face. They were not warriors seeking glory. They were exterminators removing threats. And they were very, very good at it. Fleet Commander Sarah Chen sat in her command chair and watched the debris field on her screens. Around her, the bridge crew remained silent. There was no celebration, no cheering. They had done their job. 15,000 civilians on Arcturus Prime were safe. That was enough. "All ships, form up for orbital security pattern," Sarah ordered. "Deploy recovery teams to the colony. Let them know the threat has been eliminated. And send a message to Earth. Tell them Protocol Omega was executed successfully. Tell them the galaxy will remember today." On Arcturus Prime, Governor Elena Vasquez stood on the roof of the administration building with her staff. The sky above had been filled with flashes of light as ships exploded in orbit. Now it was quiet. The Krillian fleet was gone. The human fleet remained, standing guard over their people. Elena felt tears running down her face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief and pride. Her people were safe. And the galaxy had learned that threatening humans came with a terrible price. In the days that followed, the recording of the battle spread throughout known space. Species that had never heard of humanity before watched the footage with growing horror and respect. The Krillian Empire, shocked by the loss of an entire Conquest fleet, withdrew from several frontier regions and never approached human space again. Other aggressive civilizations that had been considering expansion toward human territory quietly changed their plans. The Galactic Confederation formally recognized humanity as a major power and extended invitations for diplomatic relations. But the most important message was unspoken. It was understood by every species that watched the battle. It was simple and clear. Humans do not negotiate with those who threaten their people. They exterminate them. And they do it without hesitation, without mercy, and without regret. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The question now was whether they would remember it.